I want you to imagine, just for a second, a world where your entire life trajectory is dictated by this invisible, unfeeling authority.
Okay.
Like, we are talking about the schools you get into, the interest rates on your loans, the jobs you are offered, and even the length of a prison
Right,
sentence.
the big stuff.
Exactly. Imagine all of those monumental, life-altering events being controlled by a system you can't see, you can't question, and you certainly cannot appeal.
I mean, it sounds like a dystopian setup, like a society governed by some omniscient cold machine that just prints out your fate on a little clip of paper, and you just have to accept it.
It really does feel like fiction. You hear that and you immediately think of some sci-fi movie where humanity has just, surrendered to artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But the realization that hits you like a freight train when you actually dig into this topic is that this isn't the future. This is our current reality right now, today.
It is happening right now.
These massive decisions are increasingly being made by mathematical models and algorithms. And the crazy part is they are sold to us, to the public, with this incredible utopian promise.
A promise of total objectivity.
Right. That they will eliminate human bias, they will be perfectly objective, and they will finally make things fair.
And honestly, because human beings are notoriously biased, that pitch makes sense.
It does.
We know that judges get tired.
Right?
They might hand down harsher sentences right before lunch because they're hungry. We know hiring managers might unconsciously favor a candidate who, went to the same college as them.
Oh, absolutely.
So the pitch for algorithmic decision-making makes perfect sense on the surface. You remove the flawed human from the loop, you replace them with a clean mathematical equation, and boom, you get pure, unadulterated fairness.
But the reality of what actually happens when we deploy these models is terrifying. We are doing a deep dive today into the architecture of what data scientist Cathy O'Neil calls weapons of math destruction.
Or WMDs, yeah.
Right, WMDs. Our mission here, for you listening, is to pull back the curtain on these opaque, unregulated black boxes that are just quietly managing your life.
And they are everywhere.
They really are. We need to understand the mechanics of how they actually encode human prejudice, how they punish the vulnerable, how they widen economic inequality, and really how they fracture our shared reality.
And to really grasp this, we have to examine the psychology of why we defer to these systems in the first place.
Yeah, why do we trust them so blindly?
Because for the longest time, society has treated math as this unquestionable truth. We assume numbers do not lie. Math is the language of physics, of engineering,
Yes. When you think of a mathematical or scientific diagnosis, you expect precision. Like, if you fall off a ladder and break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it.
Exactly.
There is no debate. You don't argue with the x-ray.
It's binary. The bone is broken or it isn't. The math of the physical world is comforting because it's verifiable.
But then you step into the world of predictive algorithmic modeling and big data. We aren't measuring physical reality anymore.
Right.
Suddenly it's like that x-ray machine is broken, but the doctor is still pointing at a blurry screen and telling you your arm is fractured based on, what your neighbors are doing.
That is a perfect way to phrase it. We transition from measuring physical facts to predicting human behavior. And human behavior is incredibly messy.
So messy.
To navigate that, we really need to break down the exact mechanics of these models. We need to define the architecture of a weapon of math destruction, because obviously not every algorithm is dangerous.
Right. I get that my email spam filter is an algorithm and it works great.
Right. Keeps your inbox clean.
Exactly. I have an algorithm that recommends music to me, and I usually like the songs. So at what point does a helpful line of code mutate into a weapon? What is the threshold here?
So the sources outline 3 defining pillars that elevate a standard mathematical model into a full-blown weapon of math destruction.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first pillar is opacity, meaning the model is a black box.
Okay, so the people being judged by it literally cannot see how it works.
Exactly. They can't see the code, they don't know what data is being collected about them, and they have no idea how that data is being weighted.
Wow.
And this opacity is legally protected. These algorithms are heavily guarded as proprietary corporate secrets. Intellectual property law shields the exact mathematical formula from any public scrutiny.
Which creates an immediate power imbalance.
Huge imbalance.
Like, if a human resources manager looks at you across a desk and says, I'm not hiring you because you don't have 5 years of management experience.
Right, you can reply to that?
Exactly. You can point to your resume and say, actually, I managed a team at my last job for 6 years. Let me explain. You can argue your case.
Yeah.
But if an algorithm rejects you, you just receive an automated email from a no-reply address. There is no desk. There is no manager.
You can't cross-examine an equation.
No, you can't.
So that's opacity. The second pillar is scale. A WMD isn't a quirky spreadsheet used by one local bakery to decide how many croissants to bake.
Right.
It is a model that grows exponentially and becomes an industry standard.
It's like a tsunami.
Yes, a tsunami. Because of cloud computing and the centralization of software services, one single model can be deployed across thousands of companies instantly.
That's wild to think about.
If you're blacklisted by a hiring algorithm at one retail chain, you aren't just losing that one job. You will likely be automatically blacklisted by the same proprietary software when you apply at 50 other companies in your town.
And that leads to the third pillar, right? Damage.
Exactly. Opacity, scale, and damage. These models are fundamentally unfair, and they ruin lives.
They aren't just making, like, harmless little errors.
No, they do not just make harmless random mistakes. They make systematic errors that lock people out of opportunities. And mathematically, they're designed in a way that almost exclusively targets and punishes the most vulnerable populations.
Okay, to really understand why a weapon of math destruction is so damaging, I want to contrast it with a model that actually works. We need a baseline for a healthy algorithm.
That's a good idea.
Think about professional baseball.
Professional sports, particularly baseball, are the gold standard for healthy predictive modeling.
Yeah, anyone who has seen the movie Moneyball knows that baseball today is entirely run by data. Every pitch, every swing, every shift in the outfield is calculated by an algorithm trying to predict the highest probability of winning.
Right.
So why isn't the Oakland Athletics statistical model a WMD?
First, because of transparency. Everyone involved, the players, the managers, the fans, understands exactly what is being measured.
It's all out in the open.
If a player's on-base percentage is low, the player knows it, they can see the math.
The rules of the universe are fixed.
The rules are fixed, the environment is controlled, and the outcomes are objective. A strike is a strike. A home run is a home run.
Right, there's no ambiguity.
But the most crucial difference is the nature of the data itself. Baseball models rely on direct data. If the model wants to predict whether a player is good at hitting fastballs, it looks at thousands of data points of that specific player attempting to hit fastballs.
It doesn't look at the player's zip code or what kind of car they drive to guess if they might be good at hitting fastballs.
Exactly. And this is the fundamental flaw in WMDs, the reliance on proxy data.
Proxy data. Okay, let's unpack that.
Baseball models measure the actual behavior. But in the real world, measuring human behavior directly is expensive, difficult, or sometimes illegal. So data scientists use stand-ins, proxies.
So a proxy is basically a statistical shortcut.
Exactly.
Instead of directly measuring if I'm a reliable employee, which requires actually watching me work overtime, an algorithm might look at my credit score and use that as a proxy for my reliability.
Yes. The logic goes, people who pay their credit card bills on time are generally organized and responsible. Therefore, organized and responsible people will show up to work on time. Therefore, a low credit score means you are an unreliable worker.
But that is an enormous, flawed leap of logic.
It really is.
I mean, a person might have a low credit score because their spouse got cancer and they went into medical debt. That doesn't make them bad at organizing a warehouse or showing up for a shift.
It doesn't. But the algorithm doesn't care about the context of the medical debt. The algorithm just sees the correlation in its historical data and makes the cut.
Okay, I want to try putting this into an analogy.
Go for it.
A healthy model, like the baseball algorithm, is like a transparent recipe. You can taste the soup. You can see all the ingredients laid out on the counter. If the soup is too salty, you know exactly why you used too much salt.
Makes sense.
Next time, you adjust the spices. The feedback is immediate, it's clear, and it's based on the actual ingredients.
A direct relationship between input and output.
But a WMD is a mysterious black box. You feed the intimate details of your life into it, and it spits out a burnt cake. The chef refuses to tell you the recipe. They won't even tell you what ingredients they used. They offer no refunds. And worst of all, they actually blame you for how bad it tastes.
And here is where we get into the truly insidious mechanics of a WMD. That chef doesn't just blame you. The chef alters your life so severely that you actually become the person they predicted you were.
Wow.
This is what the sources call a toxic feedback loop.
The toxic feedback loop. Okay, this is the core mechanism we need to unpack.
A healthy model requires fresh, accurate data to correct its mistakes. If a baseball algorithm predicts a player will hit a home run and the player strikes out, the algorithm updates itself. It learns it was wrong.
Right, it adapts.
A WMD rarely gets that kind of negative feedback.
Hmm.
Instead, a WMD defines its own reality and then uses the reality it just created to justify its original prediction.
Walk me through how that actually happens mathematically. Like, give me an example.
Let's use your hiring example. A retail chain uses a proprietary algorithm to screen job applicants. The model looks at proxy data. Maybe you have a gap in your employment history, or you live in a zip code with high turnover rates.
Okay.
The algorithm calculates a probability score and labels you a high-risk candidate. You are automatically rejected.
So I don't get the job.
Right. And because you don't get the job, you remain unemployed. You struggle to pay your rent, your credit score might take a hit.
Yeah, things get worse.
6 months later, the model sweeps through public data, looks at your profile again, and sees that you're still unemployed, and now your credit is worse.
So the algorithm says, aha, look at this person's declining stability. My initial prediction that they were a high-risk failure was 100% accurate.
Exactly. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The model actively contributes to your decline by locking you out of the economy and then points to your decline as proof of its own genius.
That is so messed up.
And here's the fatal flaw for the company using the algorithm. They never learn about the mistake.
What do you mean?
The employer never finds out how many fantastic, dedicated, hardworking employees they missed out on, because those people were filtered into the trash bin before human eyes ever saw them.
So the model generates faulty analysis, creates real-world damage based on that analysis, and then harvests the damage as fresh data to prove it was right all along. It's a closed loop.
Is a closed loop of systemic punishment.
Okay, if we understand that these algorithms are essentially flawed, secret recipes that justify their own burnt cakes through proxy data and feedback loops, we need to see how they are actually deployed in society.
Definitely.
I want to take this out of the abstract realm of theory. Let's look at the public sector, specifically our public schools and our criminal justice system.
The public sector is vital to examine because these institutions are fundamentally supposed to serve the public good. When a corporation uses a WMD, their goal is profit.
Right, obviously.
When a government uses a WMD, it's often under the guise of reform, of accountability, of saving taxpayer money.
Let's look at education. There is a deeply unsettling story in the sources regarding the Washington, D.C. public school system.
Oh, yes.
Around 2007, a new mayor, Adrian Fenty, came into office with a mandate to fix the city's underperforming schools. And to do that, they brought in a consultancy to build an algorithmic system to evaluate the teachers.
It was called the IMPAT-CT system, and this was based on a statistical concept known as a value-added model, or a VAM.
Explain how a value-added model works mathematically.
Hmm.
Because the stated goal sounds incredibly reasonable, right? Identify the teachers who are failing the kids and get them out of the classroom.
The premise of a value-added model is to isolate the specific impact a single teacher has on a student's learning over the course of 1 year.
Okay.
To do this, the algorithm looks at a student's past standardized test scores. It looks at their reading level in 3rd grade, their math level in 4th grade, their socioeconomic background, and it plots a trajectory.
It creates a baseline expectation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It uses linear regression to say, based on historical data, we predict this specific student will score an 85 on their standardized test at the end of 5th grade.
Right.
Then the student actually takes the test.
And the algorithm compares the prediction to the reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the student scores a 90, they exceeded expectations by 5 points. The algorithm attributes that positive variance to the teacher. The teacher added value.
That makes sense. And if they score lower.
If the student scores an 80, they fell short by 5 points. The model assumes the teacher actively subtracted value from the student's education.
Okay, that sounds logical if we are talking about a controlled environment like baseball, but we are talking about 10-year-old children in a major city.
Right.
Enter Sarah Wysocki.
Sarah Wysocki was a 5th grade teacher in the Washington, D.C. system. By every human metric available, she was stellar.
Her principal gave her glowing reviews. The parents absolutely loved her. She was known in her community for being intensely dedicated to her students. She was the kind of teacher you hope your kid gets.
But at the end of the year, she was fired. along with over 200 other teachers.
Because the impact algorithm scored her in the bottom couple of percentiles. But how does a beloved, effective teacher get fired by a math equation? You mentioned earlier that human behavior is messy. Where did the math fail in Sarah's case?
The math failed because it relied entirely on what statisticians call noise. In statistics, you have the signal, the actual truth you are trying to measure, and you have noise, the random fluctuations and external variables that distort the signal.
The model assumes that the only variable affecting a student's test score over a year is the teacher standing at the front of the room.
It has to assume that because it's the only variable it is designed to measure. It relies heavily on the error term. But test scores fluctuate wildly for a million reasons having absolutely nothing to do with pedagogy.
Right, exactly.
A student might have stayed up all night before the test. A student might be dealing with their parents' divorce. They might be hungry. They might have test anxiety.
Or, as the investigation into Sarah's specific case suggested, they might have come from a compromised environment the year before.
This is the most tragic part of the Wysocki case. The investigation strongly suggested that the fourth grade teachers who had Sarah's students the previous year had engaged in widespread cheating.
Wait, really?
Yes. They were under immense pressure to raise scores, so they had erased the students' wrong answers and filled in the right ones.
Oh, wow. So the algorithm looked at these artificially inflated fourth grade scores and set the baseline expectation for Sarah's fifth grade class impossibly high.
Exactly. The algorithm said, these students are geniuses. They should score incredibly high in fifth grade.
Right.
When Sarah got them, she didn't cheat. She taught them properly, and she tested them honestly. But compared to the fraudulent data from the year before, the students' scores appeared to plummet.
The algorithm couldn't see the context, it couldn't see the cheating, it couldn't see the glowing human evaluations from the principal who actually watched Sarah teach.
It was completely blind to all of that.
It just looked at the delta between a fraudulent prediction and an honest reality, labeled her a failure, and terminated her career.
Because the Impactee system was a proprietary algorithm built by an outside consultancy, she couldn't appeal it.
She couldn't even look at the math.
No, she couldn't demand to see the mathematical weights they used. She was just told her score was low and she had to pack up her desk. It's a classic weapon of math destruction. It's opaque, it scaled across the entire school district, and it caused massive, unjustifiable damage.
It's infuriating because it's punishing people who are trying to do good work. But the reach of these models doesn't stop at education. The exact same logic, the exact same statistical arrogance is deployed in our criminal justice system.
Yes.
And here, the stakes are quite literally freedom versus captivity.
We are talking about recidivism models.
Algorithms designed to predict whether a criminal will commit another crime in the future.
Right. One of the most prominent ones discussed is called the LSIR, the Level of Service Inventory Revised. Judges and parole boards across the country use these algorithmic scores to determine sentencing.
So the judge looks at a dashboard, sees a high-risk score, and decides, I need to lock this person up for 5 years instead of 2 years to protect society.
Exactly.
But how is that score calculated? They aren't predicting the future with a crystal ball.
They calculate it through a lengthy questionnaire that the inmate fills out. But instead of just focusing on the severity of the specific crime the person committed, the questionnaire asks deeply invasive questions about their sociological background.
Right. It asks things like, when was your first encounter with the police? Or do your friends or family members have criminal records? Or do you live in a neighborhood with high crime rates?
Now stop and think about the data being fed into that system. We have to look at the historical context of policing. Who is most likely to have an early documented encounter with the police?
People living in low-income, heavily policed neighborhoods, which historically and currently in America disproportionately means young men of color.
Precisely. A young black man in a heavily policed, low-income neighborhood might be stopped and frisked at age 14 while walking home from school, doing absolutely nothing wrong.
Right.
That interaction generates a police record. A young white man in a wealthy suburban cul-de-sac might not have a single interaction with law enforcement until he gets pulled over for speeding at age 20.
But wait, I have to challenge this premise.
Sure.
I think a lot of people listening might be thinking, isn't the whole point of a computer that it doesn't see race? A machine doesn't know if the person filling out the form is black, white, or Hispanic. It's just crunching the answers on a piece of paper.
That's the common defense, yes.
So shouldn't the algorithm inherently be more objective than a human judge who might be secretly harboring deeply racist views?
That is the most pervasive and dangerous myth about algorithmic modeling. We assume that because a computer doesn't have emotions, it doesn't have bias. But models do not remove bias. They camouflage it with math.
They camouflage it.
Yes. It is true that the LSIR questionnaire does not explicitly ask, what is your race? That would be a blatant violation of the Civil Rights Act. It would be illegal.
So they use proxies.
Exactly. They use highly correlated proxies. Zip codes, family history, and early police encounters are incredibly strong statistical stand-ins for race and class.
Right, because of how our society is structured.
When the algorithm asks, what is your zip code? And have your friends been arrested? It is effectively sweeping up the historical residue of redlining, generational poverty, and aggressive policing policies like broken windows.
It's taking structural racism, digitizing it, and calling it objective data.
It encodes historical prejudice directly into the software. The model punishes people simply for being poor and living in poor neighborhoods. The computer might be technically blind to race, but it is hyper-aware of every single socioeconomic marker that overlaps with race.
And this triggers the toxic feedback loop all over again. Walk me through the loop for the person being sentenced.
Okay. The LSIR model brands a young man from a poor neighborhood as high risk entirely because of his zip code and his early unavoidable police encounters. The judge, trusting the math, hands down a longer prison sentence.
So he spends 5 years in a maximum security facility instead of getting 2 years of probation.
Right. He spends more time incarcerated, which means he is exposed to more violence, he is further isolated from his family, and he loses crucial years of education or job experience.
Just compounding the disadvantage.
Exactly. When he is finally released, he is dealing with the trauma of extended incarceration, he has a massive gap in his employment history, and he carries a severe felony record.
He applies for a job, and the automated hiring algorithm we talked about earlier instantly trashes his resume.
He is desperate. He is unemployable. He cannot secure housing. So with no other options for survival, he might return to his old neighborhood and enter the underground economy. He commits a crime, he gets arrested again.
And the LSIR algorithm registers the new arrest, updates its database, and effectively says, nailed it, see? I predicted he was high risk, and he reoffended.
It is a self-fulfilling downward spiral that is completely immune to logic or appeal. The algorithm creates the very failure it claims to predict.
It's just wild.
And because it's wrapped in the authoritative guise of complex mathematics, society accepts the result without question. We have effectively outsourced our moral judgments to a machine that has no capacity for morality.
It's automating inequality. We have these flaw recipes justifying their burnt cakes in our schools, ruining the lives of good teachers, and in our prisons, trapping people in cycles of incarceration.
Yeah.
But if public institutions are adopting these flawed models to save money or project an aura of toughness, what happens when private corporations adopt them specifically to maximize profit? This mathematical logic extends directly into the private sector. It dictates how companies treat you as a consumer and how they treat you as an employee.
And here is where the mathematical objective function shifts.
Yeah.
In data science, every model has an objective function, the specific goal it is trying to optimize for.
Okay.
In the public sector, the stated goal might be public safety or educational improvement, even if it fails miserably. But in the private sector, the objective function is singular, ruthless, and pure maximize corporate profitability.
Capitalism optimizes for efficiency. It explicitly ignores justice, fairness, or the common good, because those things don't show up on a quarterly earnings report.
Right.
If an algorithm can squeeze an extra 2% of profit out of a specific demographic, the algorithm is deemed a massive success, regardless of the human wreckage left behind.
To see this in action, we have to look at the marketing and advertising industry. The convergence of big data and digital consumer marketing has created tools of unprecedented predatory power.
There is a phrase regarding this from the sources that really stuck with me. Vulnerability is worth gold.
It always has been. Historically, if you think about the old quack doctors in the 1800s rolling their wagons into a frontier town to sell snake oil, who did they target?
People who were sick.
The sick, the desperate, the people who had exhausted all other options, they preyed on vulnerability. But today, the quack doesn't need a wagon, and they don't have to guess who is sick. They have big data.
They know exactly who is hurting.
Yep.
There's a company profiled called Intent Media, and they specialize in helping advertisers identify highly specific demographics. And the profile of the target audience they were actively hunting for is just chilling. I want to read the actual demographic profile they were marketing. Quote, welfare mom, W kids, pregnant ladies, recent divorce, low self-esteem, low-income jobs, experienced a recent death, physically, mentally abused, recent incarceration, drug rehabilitation, dead-end jobs, no future, end quote.
It is a literal shopping list of human misery.
How does an algorithm even know you have low self-esteem?
Because it is tracking everything you do online. It knows what time of night you are awake scrolling. It tracks the articles you read about depression or weight loss. It tracks your search history for divorce lawyers or payday loans.
It's always watching.
It clusters these data points in multidimensional space to create a psychological profile of your vulnerability.
But why? Why are they targeting these specific, deeply struggling people? Most advertisers want to target rich people with disposable income.
Because desperate people are vulnerable to predatory promises. If you're wealthy and comfortable, you don't click on an ad promising a miraculous overnight fix to your life.
That's true.
But if you have low self-esteem, a dead-end job, and you're struggling to feed your kids, you are the perfect target for a glossy, micro-targeted ad for a for-profit college.
Right. A college that promises to teach you medical billing or graphic design and turn your life around, but in reality, their degree is worthless.
It's worthless, but it costs $30,000. And the algorithm knows you qualify for federally backed student loans. The for-profit college gets the $30,000 from the government, and you are left with a useless diploma and a mountain of non-dischargeable debt.
Or they target you with subprime auto loans or payday lenders charging 400% interest. The algorithms sift through millions of data points to identify the exact moment your psychological defenses are lowest, and then they strike.
And again, we see the toxic loop. The vulnerable person clicks the ad, takes out the predatory loan, they sink further into debt. Their credit score collapses.
And the machine just keeps learning.
Exactly. The weapon of math destruction updates its weights. Excellent. This demographic is incredibly profitable to exploit. Show them more ads.
It is stomach-churning. And it's not just how they sell things to you, it's how they extract labor from you. We touched on automated hiring algorithms rejecting people, but the scale of the electronic gatekeeping is terrifying.
Over 2/3 of large companies use automated applicant tracking systems to sift through resumes. And just like the recidivism models, they rely heavily on proxies to gauge your reliability.
If the system sees you live in a zip code with bad public transit, the model flags you as a flight risk who might be late to work. You are rejected without a human ever reading your name. But what I found even crazier are the algorithmic personality tests.
Yes, the psychological screening tools. They force applicants to answer questions like, do you agree that rules are meant to be broken? Or do you ever feel overwhelmed by your responsibilities?
If you are a normal human being struggling with poverty or juggling 2 kids and a part-time job, you might answer honestly, yes. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed.
And the model instantly filters you out. You are blacklisted. These algorithms are designed to find a very specific type of compliant, low-risk, submissive worker.
It's weeding out anyone who might cause trouble.
Anyone who deviates from that psychological norm, anyone who might unionize, anyone who might have scheduling conflicts, is permanently shut out of the formal economy.
And for those lucky enough to actually pass the personality test and get a job in retail or fast food, they are then subjected to algorithmic scheduling software. We have to talk about the rise of the clopening shift.
Oh, the clopening shift. It is the perfect distillation of a model optimizing for corporate efficiency while entirely ignoring the human toll. Scheduling software is designed to match staffing levels exactly to anticipated customer foot traffic down to the minute.
Because keeping an employee on the clock when there are no customers is mathematically inefficient. It wastes money.
Exactly. So the software ingests historical sales data, weather forecasts, and local event schedules. Let's say the algorithm predicts a massive rush at 9:00 p.m. on a Friday and another massive rush at 6:00 a.m. on Saturday morning. The algorithm will schedule a worker to close the store late Friday night and then mandate that the exact same worker return just hours later to open it the next morning. A close opening. A clopen.
The software doesn't have a variable for human fatigue. It doesn't care that this worker has to commute an hour on a bus each way, meaning they get maybe 3 hours of sleep.
Right.
It doesn't care that they have to find emergency, middle of the night childcare. The algorithm just sees a grid and it moves human beings around like pieces on a chessboard to minimize labor costs.
The physical, emotional, and psychological toll on these workers and their families is devastating. The irregularity of algorithmic scheduling means they can never plan a budget, they can never commit to taking classes at a community college, they cannot arrange stable childcare.
It's an algorithm designed to keep them trapped in a state of permanent precarity. Now, Listening to all this, the payday loans, the applicant tracking, the clipping shifts, it feels like WMDs are essentially high-tech poverty enforcement
They
machines.
function that way, yes.
Really? Is this exclusively a poverty issue? Or are the middle class and wealthy also getting caught in these algorithmic traps? Because I think a lot of people might think, well, I have a salary, I don't work retail, this doesn't